Hello class, this is a recording of chapter 7, but we're not going to read the whole of chapter 7. We're going to read in this book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, from page 121 to page 132, and there'll be a further recording of the next pages as the weeks go by. So this is really just for anyone who's at the meeting today. So this is a recording of what we'd read in the meeting. Okay, so let me just move my cup of tea out of the way. Okay, so chapter 7. So far Harry has he's made the journey from 9 3/4. He's arrived at Hogwarts, and who knows what's going to happen now that he's arrived in Hogwarts. He probably feels a bit nervous because obviously there's been the children that he's seen along the way. Some of them know a little bit of magic, maybe some of them are a little bit more confident than he is. He's made some friends on the train, and now he's going to find out what house he gets placed into. So let's find out what happens, and there'll be a task for you to do at the end. Okay, so we're on page 121, chapter 7, chapter The Sorting Hat. Okay, so the door swung open at once. A tall black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross. "The first year's Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fitted the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches, like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and the magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must already be here, but Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closer together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family in Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn you house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honour. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting." Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "I shall return when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" he asked Ron. Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was only joking. Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test? In front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would they have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned and wondering which one she'd need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous. Never. not even when he'd had to take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his doom. Then something happened which made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed, "What the—" He gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall, palely white and slightly transparent. They glided across the room, talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget, I say. We ought to give him a second chance." "My dear Friar, we have given Peeves all the chances he deserves. He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "I hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony's about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles, which were floating in mid-air over 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight, dotted here and there among the students. The ghosts shone misty silver. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upwards and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." It was hard to believe that there was a ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring, nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind, or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm the thinking cap. The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quite still again. So, we've just got to try on the hat, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll. Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted, or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a large roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Abbott, Hannah! A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of the line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. Bones, Susan! Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. Boot, Terry. Ravenclaw! The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst, Mandy, went to the Ravenclaw too. But Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination, after all he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during sports lessons at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch Fletchley Justin. Hufflepuff! Sometimes Harry noticed the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others it took a while to decide. Finnegan Seamus! The sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor! Hermione Granger. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor! Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages, until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he'd better go back on the train. I don't know about you boys and girls, but have you ever actually felt like that? There's been times where I've been thinking to myself when I've been doing something that's amazing and I've been thinking, oh, this isn't real. I'm just waiting for somebody to tell me that, there's been a mistake. So I know how Harry feels. When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, Gryffindor! Neville ran off wearing it and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to McDougal Morag. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Not, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then at last, Potter Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was a hall full of people craning to get a look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that, no? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin. He hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the ruff he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden horrible feeling he'd just plunged it into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there in the centre of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognised him at once from the card he'd got out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell too, the nervous young man from the Leaky Cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. Well done, Ron, excellent," said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Zabini Blazy was made Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realised how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms wide open, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak." "Thank you." He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy, uncertainly. "Mad?" said Percy, airily. "He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. But he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry?" Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He had never seen so many things he liked to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and, for some strange reason, mint humbugs. Okay, so boys and girls, thank you for listening. We are going to stop there. So that is the top of page 132. And the reason I'm going to stop there is because there's still quite a bit to go. We're going to be reading it every day from 11:30 in the morning on the meeting. So so make sure you check your calendar and join the meeting when it happens, Monday to Friday, 11:30. But I want you to have a little think about some of the things that we've heard about in this chapter. So in the chapter, Harry's been sorted into the house Gryffindor. Now there are 4 houses in total. There is Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, Slytherin, and Hufflepuff. And let's just go back to what he says, the sorting hat. And I would like you to choose which house you would like to be placed in. So if it was your choice and the sorting hat was placing you somewhere, which house do you think you would be best placed in? Okay, so let's go back and remind ourselves what makes somebody what makes somebody chosen to go into each. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Let's think about why somebody would be chosen to go in these houses. Okay, so if somebody is in Gryffindor, they would be brave at heart, daring, and chivalrous. And chivalrous, it might be a word you want to look up and find out what that means. It's like having manners in a way. Hufflepuff is you would be just and loyal and patient. They're also very truthful and unafraid of toil. So you might want to Google what that means as well. Ravenclaw. A Ravenclaw person is quick-witted, so they have a ready mind. They're interested in their learning, and they're always kind. That would be Ravenclaw. And Slytherin folk are cunning, and they do anything that they can to meet their goals, so they're determined. Okay, so have a think about which house you fit into, and I'd like you to decide and then draw a picture of yourself in your in your house uniform. You might need to check the internet to see what colours go with each with each house. Okay, so good luck. I hope you enjoyed this part of the chapter, and we'll continue with chapter 7 from page 132 on Monday. Bye, have a nice weekend.